Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Vegans Who Lift. We are your favorite vegans. I'm Brooke Sellers, aka Miss Meatless Muscle, and I'm here with my best friend, John Thomas, the bodybuilding vegan. What's up, John?
What's up, Brooke? This is an exciting day for both of us, I know. A big step forward for us. It's going to be our first guest episode. So that's awesome. And I'm excited to share this with everyone. So, let's go ahead and let's just bring him on. Let's get him out here.
Let's
The
do
man,
it.
the myth, the legend, Robert Cheeke, aka the Godfather of Vegan Bodybuilding. Robert, how are you doing today?
Hey, John. Hey, Brooke. I am great. Thank you so much for having me. Wow, this is pretty cool. So I'm your first guest. That's I must be old school. So thanks for thinking of me and getting me on. I even wore the collared shirt today.
The most professionally dressed out of the three of us. I am with my rainbow shirt, nowhere near you.
Yeah, we specifically wanted you to be our first guest because both of us, it's funny, me and John are so similar. We always kind of joke about how we're twins, and both of us stumbled upon vegan bodybuilding because of you and because of your books. So we were really, really excited to have you on as our first guest. And we've had a vegan episode, we've had a bodybuilding episode. So it's just kind of fitting that you're next in line to kind of tie it all together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Good to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say it's a little bit surreal because before I really had Instagram or anything like that, if I would Google vegan bodybuilding, you were what came up. We're talking like at least 10 years ago. And I can still remember the day I had your book. I'm like out by the pool trying to get a little tan and reading about the different restaurants that you recommended, like Ethos in
Yeah.
Orlando. And then I ended up going there. So it was before I could even, I think Happy Cow might have been a thing, but I'm like using your book and plotting out different places I want to go eat, how to train. Outside of, I think it was called Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness or something like
Yeah.
that.
14 years ago, that book came out.
Yes. So I had that and I had Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. Those were my two go-tos. I was trying to merge, like you, veganism with bodybuilding as a way. At that time, it was I had a deep love for bodybuilding and I wanted to be vegan. And it's interesting how those have come together for activism over time for me. So I think it's worth letting you tell just a little bit of your backstory, how you got to where you're at now, because I've followed you for over a decade, but you might be new for some of our listeners, especially the younger crowd. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Well, for me, it all started growing up on a farm. I grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, agriculture community. My parents met in the animal science department. My father was a world-renowned animal scientist. He's retired now. He won awards in animal science. He published about a dozen books teaching college students how to raise animals for food. We raised animals. I bottle-fed baby calves on the way to school. I, took care of chickens and ducks and horses and ponies and goats and all kinds of animals. I had some dairy calves that I raised in 4-H, showed them and then sold them at the auction. I raised chickens, sold them at the auction, raised rabbits. I don't remember if I sold them or not, but I came from a very entrenched farming background, steep into it. I mean, I very much an agricultural family. My parents are really both big into 4-H, and they both grew up on farms. They raised me and my siblings on a farm. They got us into 4-H. They encouraged us to raise animals and sell them at the auction and make some money that way, and all of that. And my older sister decided to become vegetarian at a young age. She just, I think, around age 8 or age 10. So this would have been in the 1980s, and around 1994, I believe it was 93 or 94, she decided to become vegan. And one of those things, if I recall directly, if I recall it exactly, then this may not be totally exactly. It does make a nice story, and I do think it is as accurate as I recall. Although I don't remember how exactly you would do this. But what I remember is that she was selling chickens at the auction, but decided to buy them herself or somehow bring them home herself. You know, she wasn't going to go through with it. Now, I was in middle school then. I don't remember exactly how that works, if you can buy your own animals at the auction, or maybe she asked our parents to buy them. I don't remember what happened, but that was kind of something that set the tone. She wasn't going to sell these animals that she raised from when they were born, you know? And so she became vegan and decided to organize an animal rights week at our high school. At this point, I was a sophomore in high school, barely weighed over 100 pounds. I mean, I weighed 89.25 pounds at the start of 8th grade, barely 100 pounds when I made the freshman basketball team. I think I was like 103 or 105. And at this point, I was about 120 pounds. And I decided I would participate in this Animal Rights Week just as to support my sister. It was honestly, it was an experiment for a week. Like December 8th, 1995, I'm going to go give this thing a try. It was a Wednesday. I went, I watched videos. This was like in the cafeteria or in the school auditorium, whenever we could arrange this at the high school. I watched videos of large-scale factory farming and animal testing. I listened to speakers talk about animal rights, if you will, about veganism, topics surrounding what you might fall under this category of animal rights. I read literature, black and white, like literally black and white pamphlets. Even the videos were black and white, many of them from PETA. They were made in the 80s, probably, or early 90s. And I had conversations with fellow classmates. And that's really what was the catalyst to what started as 1 week to now, help me with the math, you know, something like 1,400 weeks, 28 years later. I'm in my 29th year as a vegan. I wondered if I would stick with it. You know, I struggled at first, to be honest. The first couple of weeks, I didn't know what the heck to eat. I didn't have my own money. I was in high school. I was just eating cafeteria food that did not include animal products. My calorie intake was super low. I was a 5-sport athlete. Even though I was small, I was fast. I was a runner, soccer player, track and field, where I did track and field track and field events. Even as a small guy, threw shot put, discus, javelin, the whole thing, long jump, hurdles, sprinting, 3,000 meters, did it all. I wrestled when I didn't make the basketball team, you know, after my freshman year. Played tennis, rode my bike, and started doing push-ups and sit-ups, you know, getting into this whole fitness lifestyle. And, you know, eventually put on a little bit of muscle, became a better athlete. I was on the #1 ranked soccer team in the state of Oregon in high school. I even started on the varsity team as a vegan, but I quit because I didn't really fit in with the players. And so I ran on the #2 cross country team in the state of Oregon. A lot of elite athletes who went on to be Division I runners, who went on to run with Olympic athletes. Like, I came from a very athletic background with my school. Many of my soccer teammates went on to play pro soccer, for example. One of the guys from our school went on to be the highest paid player on the Marlins for a period of time, playing pro baseball, all that kind of stuff. And then I went on to run cross country at Oregon State University for their club team. And that is when I discovered the sport of bodybuilding. I was a cross country runner at the university level. I was obviously very lean, very fast, very thin. And then a childhood friend I bumped into at a grocery store after we'd both kind of gone off to college for a year and met up in our hometown, had these muscle magazines, Flex magazine. And I you know, I was like, I didn't even want to look at the cover, all these big veins and all this stuff. But then all of a sudden I got into it. I flew out for my 21st birthday. I met Arnold Schwarzenegger at the Arnold Classic. Back then, you could get VIP tickets and get a Polaroid photo with him. I did that on my 21st birthday. I met Jay Cutler at the airport. We've been friends for over 2 decades now, ever since. I texted him on Christmas. He texted me back on Christmas. You know, I saw Ronnie Coleman in the best shape he's ever been in his entire life, which was the 2001 Arnold Classic, 3 years into his Olympia. Everyone agrees that was the best shape. I was up front as a VIP, watched him. And then I started competing. That year, I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I did it for a decade, you know, and won a couple shows, runner-up 4 times, built the website that you both stumbled upon 22 years ago. And here we are. And here we are where, you know, the torch has been passed many times. And I'm proud to see people like the two of you, John and Brooke, running with it, where I kind of step back a little bit these days, write books, and do my thing outside of the bodybuilding stage.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story. I think we both can only hope that we'll be able to say the same thing in a few decades. It's incredible. I think for me, what's crazy about your story is you have an agricultural background. And you find, I mean, me and John, we've had arguments with people who come from the agricultural industry, and I'm sure, John, you remember, where they're like, well, I grew up on a farm and we took care of the animals and we did this and we did that, and it's kind of like an argument against veganism. But you've got like all this ammo because you did grow up in the agricultural industry, and you guys didn't, it sounds like you guys didn't treat the animals terrible, but you still found veganism because it was still taking the life of a being, whether they're happy-go-lucky running around or not.
Here's the thing, Brooke, and this is one of the hardest parts, you know, and I try not to get emotional talking about it. I almost did. I might have to blow my nose here in a moment. You know, when I was talking about my sister first becoming vegan, about that interaction with the chickens at the auction. So the hardest part for me is that, yeah, I spent over 20 years on a farm. Even when I moved out at age 18, I came back, you know, ran out of money, came back, you know, even when I was 20, mid 20s, I was living back at home, saving some money. When I was first dating Karen, before we eventually got engaged and married, you know, I lived at home for a year on the farm again. I was out there a few weeks ago, cows all over the field, you know, I just say, you know, kind of say to them, sorry, I you know, for what your fate's going to be. But Brooke, the hardest part was, yeah, we treated the animals well. We were a small farming operation. There was a functional dairy right next door where they had like a dead pile of cows and all this kind of stuff. And there was another dairy about a mile away. So there were 2 functional dairies on, you know, nearby. But we had a small 20-acre family farm operation, largely hobby farm to raise animals and just sell them at the local 4-H auction. But that's the hardest part, is that you raise an animal. I had 2 dairy calves, for example, that I raised and sold. You raise them from when they're born, essentially, and they build that trust with you. They follow you around like a puppy. And then you say, you know what? I'm done with you, you know? And now you're going to be somebody's food. That's the hard part, you know? And that's what as a teenager helped me stick with it. When I wasn't eating the best, I wasn't eating, you know, I was eating bagels and bread rolls and not a lot of healthy stuff. But it was like, I just can't break that trust, you know? Like that's devastating. And that's the hard part. And so, yeah, I've been there, you know, I've been there from the farming background. I know what that's like. I've been surrounded by that community. And I've also been to, you know, more animal sanctuaries than I can count. I've got one nearby here, actually a few nearby. And I see another side of things, you know, and I've seen people like myself and my sister and my brother and other friends change and totally come with a different mentality, psychological approach than we had when we saw animals as commodities and a way to profit off them. And I don't know if that gives me, I don't know if that gives me anything, you know, credibility. It gives me perspective, I think, where, yeah, not a lot of us grew up on farms. I mean, especially those who are a little bit younger. I'm almost 44 in a couple of days here, but those of us who are a little bit younger, there's just not as many farms as there used to be. You know, I grew up in the kid in the 1980s. More people lived on farms back then, and obviously more back in the 70s and the 60s, the 50s, you know, go down the line. There's just not that many farms now. So a lot of people don't have, including a lot of current vegans, don't have that perspective to have that first person experience. You don't need to have it. You can be well aware of everything that goes on in the farming industry or the industrial agriculture industry and come to these conclusions of compassionate reasons to keep animals off your plate. But I think part of my story, if you want to call it that, and we all have one, part of my story is here's a guy who barely weighed 100 pounds when he became vegan. He spent 20 years on the farm and he became a 220-pound champion vegan bodybuilder. And that's his story. And that's had an impact, obviously, on both of you and on so many others, from Will Tucker to Tori Washington to Nimai, all these different names, you know, Natalie Matthews, I hear. Many of them discovered my work a long time ago. And it's because of that story. And now, because I did get emotional, I'm going to blow my nose. Sorry for that.
No, go for it. You've been a trailblazer. And I think what I want to ask you now is, do you identify, or do you think your friends would call you empathetic as kind of like your nature? Do you see that? Do you feel that?
Oh yeah. I think it's also something that's kind of intrinsic and inherent. Why I became vegan at a young age, I think, was because I have strong levels of empathy and compassion. And I do. I mean, I do. I'm the guy that gets sad during movies. I'm the guy that gets sad when I travel to poor countries and see stray animals all over the place who don't have access to veterinary care, or perhaps a comfortable home to go to, despite the freedom they have to go anywhere they want. I have natural levels of empathy and compassion, and not everybody does. I guess I'm fortunate that I do, I think. I'm not sure. And I do believe that played a role in my early adoption to veganism, where many people are just far more calloused. They don't wear their emotions on their sleeve. They don't see somebody who's struggling, human or non-human animal, and want to help. John, I'm the guy, and I don't talk about this because there's no reason to, but I'm the guy who, you know, spent my young adulthood, you know, basically late childhood, young adulthood, trying to help homeless and people in need. You know, I would spend, even when I didn't have a lot of my own money, I would use the money, the food, the resources I had during every holiday season to, you know, to pass out stuff down by the waterfront where a lot of unhoused people hung out. This is back in the 90s. I worked for Food Not Bombs as a teenager. You know, I made meals. Food Not Bombs was created in the 70s. So it basically is an organization, a nonprofit organization that creates plant-based meals for anyone who's hungry. And I used to do that back in the 90s, back in 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and provide basically like a soup kitchen. We made vegan meals inside a church, and then had them available in Central Park in my town. It was called Central Park in Corvallis. And then, man, in a crazy full circle moment, you know, when I fell on some hard times, when I was living in Portland, sleeping on the floor at my sister's rental house, you know, I showed up for Food Not Bombs as a participant to get some food, you know, because I was hungry. So like, I've always had that side, you know, like that empathetic side. So that you know, that steered me in those early years of bodybuilding too, John. Like, there were times I was one of the only vegan bodybuilders in the whole world. Yeah. And that carried a weight on my shoulders. I was in Flex magazine 3 years in a row, way back. You can look it up. 2001, 2002, 2003. I was in Iron Man, Muscle and Fitness, Natural Bodybuilding magazine. I was on the covers of some magazines. Especially a lot of international magazines. They put me on all these vegan magazine covers or inside covers or 7-page spreads way back in the 90s or 2000. I guess it was 2000s. You know, like, but I carried this weight that I didn't even like going to the gym at that point. There were times when I resented bodybuilding. I was on front page of newspapers all the time because I was different. I was new. And it was cool. I mean, I got to be on some highly distributed, or widely distributed newspapers, like right on the cover on at least 4 of them that I can think of, that where I was on the cover of these newspapers as a front page story. And there were times I just hated bodybuilding, but I kept doing it because I knew what I represented for the animals, and there weren't very many other people doing this. And I knew that like, this is what I have to do if I'm going to show people that you can achieve your fitness goals without consuming animal protein. And so I powered through. And eventually, you know, I got back to enjoying lifting. But we've all gone through those phases, I think, where whether it's school, doing a graduate program, a master's program, or even just finishing any level of school or a job where you're like, man, I don't want to do this right now, but I know this is a stepping stone to what I need to do for what I want to represent as a career individual, or in my work, or in my craft, or as an artist, or whatever I'm doing. And that's how I felt. But it was empathy and compassion that always kept me going forward. And it's what keeps me going today. You know, I struggle now with some issues with anxiety and other things. It's a bummer. Trying to be a high performer, or in this, somewhat in the spotlight for 30 years is tough. It wears on me, but many times I try to remember why I'm doing it, and that helps me get through it.
I can personally relate a lot. This last prep for me was by far the hardest thing I've done in my life. And I don't know how someone does this without that pressure of, you need to do this because nobody else is, or not enough people are. And if you don't do this, maybe you won't have as big of an impact on saving some animals and making the world a better place. Like, people that say they do bodybuilding just for fun or love of the sport, my mind is blown, because it's so consuming, it's so painful. So for me, I can relate to you. Like, I don't think I'm quite in the spotlight now that you were, but that's my goal. And to use bodybuilding as my form of activism, I think it gets, for me personally, the most bang for the buck, per se. Maybe one day when I'm older, I can transition to something else, but right now, that seems like the best thing for me. I wanted to tie in too on your empathy. It stems, you had the animals, but in your story, you said you actually showed up the first time for your sister. It wasn't maybe something you were hugely interested in yourself, but you still showed up for someone else. And I think that just speaks to your character. And I had a few things I wanted to say. I really want to put this out there. I feel like you are a great example and role model for men in today's society. You can be strong, you can be successful, you can have businesses, yet you can also wear your heart on your sleeve. You can cry in front of people. You can encourage people to be a better version of themselves and achieve more, while also not putting them down. That's one thing I've noticed with your activism. You've always been an extremely positive and kind person, and you're not sitting here talking badly about anyone on your journey. It really, I think there's a lack of positive emotional role models that are also strong for men to look up to. So I really appreciate you sharing all of your sides here with us today.
Especially vegan.
Yeah, especially vegan.
Especially vegan men. I was just thinking as you both were talking, I mean, the bodybuilding industry, because I relate to both of you. Sometimes I will be honest, I absolutely hate bodybuilding, not because of, and I had to explain it like this to my boyfriend one time. Like, sometimes I hate bodybuilding, but like I hate the industry, but I love my own little world of vegan bodybuilding, like with John and like you and like all these awesome, like positive people. But the industry is hard sometimes. Um, like you said, like people, I mean, it's competitive, obviously, it's a competitive sport, but I can only imagine being a man and then being vegan. And then you have these like sort of expectations of what a male bodybuilder is supposed to be like. And I can only imagine how hard that would be, being a male in this sport and being vegan, and all of the pressure that you have from your other male peers.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words. And I don't know. I don't always think of myself as a role model per se. And part of it is I can't really help the way that I act or communicate or carry myself, because again, I think that a lot of that is intrinsic, inherent. Some of it may have been learned, I want to make sure I give parents credit for that if that's where it goes back to, or siblings or teachers or role models or whatever it may be. But that's just the approach that I take naturally. It would be a false narrative or false pretense for me to try to be this like alpha, aggressive, negative character. I would be acting, and it'd be hard to play that role. I don't know that I would do very well. But I think I agree with both of you. There are many aspects of bodybuilding that I don't like, or about the bodybuilding industry. There's a lot of sexism. There's a lot of favoritism. There's follow the money. There's all these different things in it that I don't always like and appreciate. In fact, I wrote about that in a newspaper interview one time years ago, where I just walked out of the Olympia largely because of the sexism aspect. I was working at the event, or I was attending the event, and just talking to people and observing things. And I mean, this is way back when I was working with Jamie Eason and Bob Ciccarello. I used to work at the bodybuilding.com booth. Was back in the day. I don't know if either one of you remember this. They had the biggest booth, like an 80-foot long booth, like 8 booths all combined. It was the biggest, most popular booth, bigger than Muscle Tech, bigger than anything really. I worked there at the Olympia, worked there at the Arnold. I got in with bodybuilding.com. In fact, the guy that managed the tour is a bit older than me. He's probably 20 years older than me, in his 60s now, I think. Certainly late 50s or early 60s. He was from the neighboring town, real small town of 3,000 people or less, that I grew up in. Back when he grew up there was probably 1,000 to 2,000 people in that town. And anyway, I got in with them and got a chance to work right alongside Jamie Eason and Bob Ciccarello and some pretty big names back then. And I just saw sides of the industry that I didn't like. I worked with a lot of women in particular, a lot of I don't know what division they were, bikini, if that existed back then, or physique or whatever, but they were just talking about, in order to make it to IFBB pro status. Again, this is 15 years ago. All these different things that you had to do, including treating the male dominant people who ran the organization a certain way and all this kind of stuff. And I just, I kind of had enough. And again, these are first person things from people these were magazine models. These are people in the industry who were willing to talk about some of the struggles they had to do within the industry in order to climb the ladder. And I was like, that's not something I'm super proud to be part of. And I kind of walked away from bodybuilding completely for a while. And then kind of got back into it a little bit, just, obviously just through like you said, our own smaller bubble of vegan friends and colleagues, and help kind of build and nurture that community. But on a large scale, I've been going to these events since 2001 for, was that 22, 23 years now. And yeah, there's a lot of things that make me not love the industry, but I still like the grind, the hard work. And I was in the gym 2.5 hours yesterday. I'm leaning out these days, working on some other particular fitness goals and all that. I still like a lot of that without, all the baggage that comes with it.
I look forward to that day. Not that I am trying to enjoy it as I'm in it, but I do think you're in a long-term good spot to be in. So one of the biggest reasons we wanted to bring you on is you've been on this path. You have the vegan bodybuilding side, but even just as a vegan, you've been vegan for how many years now?
This is my 29th year. Yeah.
So
wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, a little more than 28 years. So just about a month and a half over 28. But I like to say I'm in my 29th.
I want to talk about some of the changes, because I've been vegan for like 17, going on 18 years now, and it's changed so much in that time frame. But back in like 1995, when you're in the cafeteria watching this movie, how many people knew what a vegan or a vegetarian was? Like, was that even common knowledge, even the nomenclature? If you had to guess, like, did you know anyone locally that was vegan or vegetarian? Because it's easy to find people now on social media, and I think it's potentially easy for someone like Brooke or myself to think we're in this bubble where there's more vegans than there really are. But I remember back like in school, I was like one of 1,000 maybe, or two of it, like maybe there were two in the entire middle school that were vegetarian or vegan. So tell us a little bit about like early and like what's changed, the biggest things you've seen change.
Okay, well, are you ready for this? All right,
Yeah.
sit down for this, especially young folks. So when I became vegan, we didn't even have the internet for most people. You didn't have a computer at home. You had to rent it at the library. This is 1995. This is the same year the internet came out, just like in, I think it was 2005. That's when YouTube was, invented. So I became vegan the same year the internet came out. So you had to like schedule time in the library. They had to teach you how to use it. A Metacrawler, Netscape Navigator. You had your little time in the library. You could try to get extra periods off and try to learn how to use this World Wide Web. There was not an online social community. In fact, there wasn't resources. I wrote some animal rights papers in high school, but this was more like my senior year after the internet had been around for 2 years and I was still using the library. I don't know that I had a computer at home until maybe the next year. So like that's one big change. Another one was the grocery store. I mean, when you looked at the food that was available, aside from produce, which we all know, is kind of the answer for our health and longevity anyway, is plant-based whole food things that we all know and love, legumes, grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, real food. But when you look at plant-based milks, there was the watery rice milk, there was hemp ice cream, and a rice dream ice cream. I'm sure you recall some of that stuff. The Eve's Veggie Cuisine was around. They're actually from 1985, believe it or not. So like those vegan deli slices, they were around. Eve's Popman made that brand back in the 80s. That was around. But as far as a community, not a whole lot. So I was lucky, though, that in my school, even though we're in an agriculture community, we had a high school club called Students for Peace Through Global Responsibility. This was a forward-thinking, environmentalist, kind of hippie type of group. And I found my sister was in that group. I found my way into that group. So when I became vegan, there were others. They were in the Students for Peace Through Global Responsibility group that put on the Animal Rights Week that my sister organized. And as it would turn out, I would become very much a part of that community. Now, I didn't mention it earlier, and maybe it's worth mentioning, but I had to go through some phases. So when I became vegan, I was literally going to Sandwich Express or McDonald's every single day for lunch with two of my friends, and I stopped that completely. And in fact, my friend circle changed a little bit because I was of course I was a teenager. I was a passionate, all of a sudden, flip the switch. I became like an animal rights activist like the next day. So naturally my friends are like, what's going on? Or why aren't you hanging out with us anymore? Why aren't you going to lunch with us anymore? Why, so I went through a phase where I had a different group of friends. But and then later I was organizing the Animal Rights Week as a senior in high school. I was a major part of the Students for Peace, the Global Responsibility group as a senior. But man, it's full circle. I also went back and I don't want to say mended, but maybe nurtured or replenished or reinvigorated those friendships. And to this day, one of those guys who I went out to lunch with every day is my friend Jordan, who's helped me with every single one of my books, including spending the last 2 years helping me write The Impactful Vegan, my new book. 2 years he worked on that with me. And then the other friend, there were three of us that I just heard from a few weeks ago, and we keep in touch. And we're all still, in fact, he became a roommate later on and all of, in our 20s and all of that. And both have adopted a mostly plant-based diet. One went full vegan for a while. The other one mostly plant-based. And they still continue to do that to this day. And they were the two that I left behind when I stopped going to what was basically a local Subway. It was Sandwich Express and then McDonald's. And so I guess the only other way to answer your question is it was still a pretty foreign concept back then. Veganism was not super well accepted. We had to really communicate that throughout my teenage years in high school, what that was, what it meant, what it represented, why other people might want to be interested in it. And then I just got active. I was part of demonstrations and protests and all of that. But I think really most importantly, I probably should have written about this in my new book because I think what was more impactful, speaking of my new book's title, was I actually did things that created real change. Not that protests and marching, all that doesn't. It certainly does. But like what I mean was I met with the physical education department, the PE department, and I got them to order all synthetic leather materials, basketballs, soccer balls, whatever, which is something they never would have done. I created a recycling program that didn't exist. I created some composting stuff on school campus that didn't exist. But the thing I was most proud of was getting animal skins off of the equipment that was being used by 1,200 people in our school. And so that was something that was impactful that I was involved in as a teenager by simply speaking up and saying there's alternatives. I did the same with getting non-leather soccer shoes, even though I was from a real preppy soccer community. Like I told you, a bunch of players that went on to play pro soccer, and it was the cool thing to do. It wasn't, if you were a football player, that wasn't the cool thing at my high school. If you were on the soccer team, that was the ticket, which I was on the varsity team, but I couldn't wear, or I chose not to wear the really popular leather shoes by the biggest brands. I had these, quite frankly, pretty crappy, synthetic, plasticky shoes. But again, I chose ethics over favorability, or I chose ethics over popularity, or chose ethics over going with the crowd. And I'm fairly proud of that. And then obviously, as years went on, people became more aware of what vegan meant, and a few people from my cross country team and my friend group, even in high school, did join me, at least for a period of time, and were vegan with me, which community makes everything better. So that helped.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of really good points. The stores, like the offerings in the stores, I mean, even Walmart now, it's so easy. It's so easy to be a vegan in the 2020s. Like, so many options. And I think for a lot of people, like you said, obviously for health, whole foods, plant-based diet is going to be the best route for longevity, things like that. But a lot of people might be doing this for ethical reasons over health reasons. And it's a lot easier to go pick up a vegan burger and swap that for your regular burger than to try and go home and learn how to make bean burgers. Even though it's not that hard, it's just an extra step that some people aren't ready to take yet. I think what worked well for you and what would work well for any of our listeners, maybe if they're pre-vegans or struggling on their vegan journey, once you find your why and your reason, you'll find a way to make it happen. I was very similar to you, actually. I was wrestling at 14. I turned vegan at 13 as a week-long experiment. I failed 2 days in. I had some peanut M&Ms. I forgot that they used milk, but I stuck with it because I cared in a similar way as you about the animals, and I didn't want to contribute to suffering. So even though I had to eat French fries every day at school, or really ended up just packing my own lunch to try and have some other options, it didn't bother me so much to have to make, you could say that's a sacrifice, but it's not really a sacrifice. I would say losing your life as an animal is a pretty big sacrifice. So once you find your why, you'll stick with it. So that's something that I think people could take away here, is really try and delve into, what do you feel? What does your heart tell you is right? And how do you want to reflect that with your changes? What I wish I had done at your age was get more into activism. I kept it a secret. A lot of people didn't know I was vegan. I had been bullied a lot as a kid. I didn't want to share it so much because I was afraid of being pushed outside. Yet here you are, on a farm turning vegan. And then also, I wanted to mention this earlier. You went about as far as you could. You went from cross country to bodybuilder. So you're almost like balancing on every extreme end that you could be, but also finding yourself along the way. I think that's important for people to experiment and explore and give themselves space to be different than maybe they were raised. So yes, we have a few list of topics, but we both mostly wanted to keep it conversational. I feel like we got a good idea of your backstory to bring you kind of into the present, into the now. We like to do this opening 43 minutes in about your
I'm long-winded. I know it. I know that about myself. I'm self-aware.
well, if somebody was listening and they were me, they could maybe jump in now because I knew a lot of the backstory. Maybe not all of it, but I knew a lot of it. But uh, to bring you into the now, what's like one or two of your wins of this week or the past week that you would say?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it's actually been a pretty hard week, to be honest. Where I've had some adversity. I've been feeling a bit down. Had some struggles, including with anxiety and expectations of me and performance expectations, professional expectations, personal expectations, financial expectations, a lot of stuff. I had a friend die recently, totally unexpected. I just saw him a few months ago, age 29. Another good friend just lost her son, age 10. Again, unexpectedly, tragically. Some of my best friends I grew up with, their father just passed away. I went to that funeral. And then another one of my best friends, as I know you know, Giacomo's father just passed away. I've had a lot of sadness, to be honest. So finding wins is something I've actually been kind of searching for. So I'm glad you asked. So, and sometimes they're just little things. Yesterday, I walked 34,000 steps, 15 miles.
Wow.
I've been averaging over 20,000 steps a day since the new year started. And I covered over 30,000 steps in a day multiple times in December. And it's maybe a form of therapy for me. I walk a lot, even with all this snow and below freezing temperatures. I walk at home, just circles. Dogs kind of follow me until they get bored, until they realize I'm just walking in circles. I walk at home. I do some walking on the treadmill while I work from my phone at the gym. And so that's been really good. I've been leaning out. I mean, I've dropped I went from 210 to 187 this morning in just 14 weeks or so. And walking's been a big part of that. And so that was I guess if you want to call that a win. I also did a nearly 7-minute plank yesterday, which I think is fairly
good.
6 minutes, 48 seconds. I could have gone 7, but I wasn't looking at the clock, and I stopped. I could have gone another 12. And I won some physical challenges recently within some team challenges that I was doing. I did 57 consecutive push-ups. Won that challenge. I won a step challenge, like I said, doing over 30,000 steps in a day, and many such days of 25 to 38,000 steps in a day, and won that challenge. And also, I've been struggling to some degree, to get certain endorsements for my new book from some people that just haven't really gotten back to me despite my efforts. But people like Rich Roll came through right in the end, and he's very, very busy, and I knew that. And he came through. Tabitha Brown, some pretty big name people came through right in the end, right when everything goes off to production, and that's a win, And then also,
huge win.
Yeah, and also I rarely ever talk about it for a variety of reasons, including worrying how I might be judged or what people might, especially outside of veganism, might think. So I don't talk about it, but I've been dealing with some anxiety stuff, and I scheduled an appointment with a clinical psychologist, which is on Monday. That's a win because I put a lot of things off, and I don't talk about things like, obviously I've achieved a decent amount of stuff. It's all subjective or matter of perspective, but I've been a New York Times bestselling author. I've been featured in the New York Times. I've been interviewed by all these things, been on magazine covers. I don't know, won some bodybuilding shows. I've done a few things, traveled the 5 continents. I've hopefully made a difference for animals and for people. But despite all that, I still struggle with some anxiety issues, and I don't want to talk about it because I feel like people will associate that, with my long-term veganism. And the reason I say that is because I did open up about it just one time on a podcast, and I got blasted on Twitter by someone who was just spreading it all over the internet. This is what long-term veganism will do, because my anxiety kicked in later in life at age 35, about eight years ago. And it's something I still deal with. Don't know exactly the root cause of it or anything like that, but acknowledging that and talking about it a little bit more, and like making an appointment to talk to somebody professionally about it. It's the first time I've ever done that, so that's another win, because like I said, I don't mean, and I'm absolutely not trying to be a downer, but the last couple of months with so much loss of life in my life, whether they're my friends or my friends' children or my friends' parents, it weighs on me. Again, John, it comes back to empathy. I think like you're hurting, so I'm hurting, Yep. Brooke, you're hurting, I'm hurting because I hurt for you. And so when it's some pretty close friends, like including, I was friends with my friend's dad also, these childhood friends I grew up with in my hometown. And I was buddies with their dad too. And then got the news that he, had an accident and passed, and I flew back home for the service and all that. And, those things did set me up where it was kind of hard to find some wins because it's up here. Yeah. I was struggling here and struggling here. For those who aren't watching, I'm pointing to my head and pointing to my heart. That's where I've been hurting. And so something silly as walking for 34,000 steps, covering 15, 16 miles on a snowy day. That's a win for me right now, because that's what I needed.
That's a huge win. Look, John can vouch for me here. I felt like my win from 2023 was I came out still standing, and that's a win sometimes. You get beat up, you get so many things thrown your way. And I think it's a win that you're still here and you're still trucking along. You're still prioritizing your book. You're getting your 2.5 workout in. I mean, that is a huge, huge win that you're here. You're on this podcast today. You're facing all the challenges in your life. And I can certainly relate to feeling like you can't share certain things that are going on with you. I had SIBO and some struggles with IBS a little bit last year, which had nothing to do with veganism, more so with bodybuilding. But I have really, really held back forever. And John keeps telling me, like, you really need to share your story. You've got to share your story because people are going to relate to you. You're going to help so many people. But just like you, I am so worried people are going to say, oh, you're vegan. That's why you eat all those mock meats, or you eat all those vegetables, like whatever it is. But I have opened up about it on this podcast, and it's honestly really liberating. And I really can't wait to share more of my story. But I totally relate with you on that. But I think John's right, as he is most of the time, that it not only helps us heal, but it can also help other people, which is really what we all do anyways.
Well, yeah, Brooke, if I can just interject, and I won't be long on this one because I know I am long-winded, but like you made a point that made me think about something. I've thought about it before, but not very often, that there's this double standard, a strong double standard that who knows what the cause of my anxiety is. It could be childhood trauma. It could be all this stuff, right? But it gets associated with my diet, at least by some loud people on the internet. Well, then don't I get credit? I'm a champion bodybuilder because I'm vegan, or I'm a New York Times bestselling author because I'm vegan. That I win these fitness challenges because I'm vegan. I transform my physique wholesale because I'm vegan. Like you don't always get that. You don't always get that credit. It's that veganism is the blame. Oh, you're struggling with this. Oh, you injured your wrist. you know, I had a wrist injury. Oh, okay, maybe it's because you're vegan, whatever. What about the bodybuilding shows I won? What about touring all over the world, speaking in China and Australia and the UK and the Caribbean and all over the world? You know, and being able to impact people. Having my book, you can even see some of these translated into 8 languages worldwide. You know, maybe that's because I'm vegan, right? Or even the fitness stuff, you know, being able to do this for 29 years as a vegan athlete. But that all gets erased by a lot of non-vegan perspective of, oh, you got anxiety, or oh, well, you're down to 187 now. Well, that's, you know, that's intentional. I'm deliberately losing weight. It's part of a program that I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to do this and seeing if I can. But there is this double standard sometimes that veganism will be blamed for something, but not get the credit for something. And I'm really trying to change that story and that narrative. And that's, I think, what I do talk about to some degree in the Impactful Vegan is shining more light on the good things that we do, or the wins, as you say, or the accomplishments or whatever, and bringing some credit to that. Just like many people who prevent and reverse disease. I mean, I've been in the plant-based space almost as long as the vegan space. I've been around so many of the Forks Over Knives, Esselstyn kind of crowd, like, I mean, 12 years on the vegan cruise, which is largely that crowd. I've seen so much disease reversal and people just completely transforming their health and their longevity through a plant-based diet. That deserves some credit to veganism, you know, for all the blame that, you know, the majority, of course, we're only 1% of the global population. And so the majority is always going to be against us and always going to stick with the status quo. People are afraid to be different. That's what I love about John in particular, if I can just say that. John, from what I know about you, and I've met you a couple of times, I think you're one of the nicest people I've met, not just in the industry, but period. You are not afraid to be different, whether it's the clothes you wear, hairstyle, the things you say, the things that the journeys you embark on. Like, it reminds me a little bit of my like rebellious self as an early vegan. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm bringing it in alignment that I think we need to give more credence, credence, and value to those who are willing to stand on their own and dare to be different and say, this is me. This is what I represent. This is who I am. This is where I feel comfortable. And I appreciate that about you, John. And I think for things like bodybuilding success or business success or branding, I see a lot of this stuff that both of you are doing on a way bigger scale than I was ever able to do. You just have more of an entrepreneurial mind. You're more tech savvy and more industry savvy and business savvy. And I think a lot of credit does need to go back to the vegan lifestyle decisions, ethics, and things that fuel that. Because as you've both said, you've been a little burned out at bodybuilding at times or whatever. It's been your ethical North Star, your veganism, that has powered you through to have these higher successes in selling apparel or in coaching or whatever, because you're driven by something. So of course veganism should be credited for that. In fact, my greatest sports achievements were because I had it deep ingrained that I'm doing this to make a statement for animals, to help animals, to spare animal lives, because I'm going to make a splash in this physical result, and it's going to show people that you can do this in a compassionate and cruelty-free way. So of course, veganism gets credit for even those physical accomplishments that I did. So I think it's time that we start to not blame and wave and point the finger about what veganism may have caused or which is all speculation anyway, or may have impacted, but also recognize where veganism has allowed people to shine in ways they probably never would have before.
1,000% agree with you. I think all three of us could probably say the single greatest decision we've made in our lives was going vegan, and not just for aligning with our hearts and our empathetic nature and for the animals, but who would we be right now if we weren't vegan? We wouldn't be on this Vegans Who Lift podcast. We wouldn't be talking about your book, The Impactful Vegan. I wouldn't be calling myself the bodybuilding vegan. And I didn't used to always be so different and out there. I was bullied a lot as a kid, and I tried to conform. I tried to look as normal as humanly possible. Whatever normal could be, like black clothes, gray shoes, kind of like short, clean hair, because I had been bullied for so long. I didn't want to let anybody know I was vegan. I wouldn't wear a rainbow shirt because I wouldn't want somebody to think maybe I was gay, even though that I love gay people. My sister is gay, or at least bi, and like I was so concerned with what other people thought and so afraid of bringing attention to myself that I didn't want to put it out there. And now I'm seeing being different is what I can do to get attention for veganism. I think what you spoke on is, I imagine some of your anxiety came from, I'm speculating here, but you have objectively achieved a lot. And I think that you want to maximize your time and your value on this planet. And so you put a lot of that pressure on yourself. I doubt it's so much outside pressure. It's probably all internal. And I can say from my journey, oh, there's no way I would be as good of a bodybuilder as I am today. And not saying I'm amazing, but I would not be anywhere near the level I am right now if the rest of the world was vegan. I wouldn't have my driving cause. I would be doing something else with my time. But right now, I can't like, I put pressure on myself. I can't show up at a really good gym with vegan tattoos, a vegan hat, and a vegan shirt and have a bad set or do something stupid. Like, I have to be, and I better not get angry. People ask me all the time, "Oh, did that make you angry? They said something about you. Did you get I gotta smile through it because I don't want to be that asshole vegan. I don't want to be labeled as that and make vegans look bad. Like, we are walking billboards. So, not to get super long-winded here, but I think you also place, Robert, a bit more pressure on yourself because you have that vegan side on top of being a best-selling author, on top of being a bodybuilder. Because I get to hang out right now. I'm at MI40 in Tampa with some of the best IFBB pros. I could name 3 top 10 Olympians that I've spoken to personally that have told me, I'm taking a year off because I got anxiety, or I'm taking a step back, or I don't know how to handle the spot that I'm in right now. I'm really going through it mentally. And none of these people are vegan. They're just, I think you have to be wired and worked in a certain way to get to the top. And it's almost impossible to come out from that without some sort of anxiety or some sort of self-questioning, like, am I doing enough? Is this enough? Because we're always trying to strive to get to that top level spot. So I rambled a little
Agree.
bit, but I wanted to share that.
No,
My win for the, or sorry, go ahead.
what's interesting, I just want to add, because that's actually what my doctor said when I got diagnosed with anxiety. He said, Robert, he's like, oh man, there's this great quote that he said. Oh man. Oh, I mean, it was just funny because hearing a doctor say this. So this isn't normally the way I talk, okay? But just you know, I'm quoting here. So my doctor said, Robert, you know what your problem is? You have to be the goddamn best at everything. He said the problem is between your ears. He said you have to be the best in the world at everything you do. And you know what? For a period of time, I was the world's most recognized vegan bodybuilder for years. I was the best in the world at what I was doing. And then I go on and write like New York Times best-selling book and all this stuff. And yeah, I've got this new book coming out that it weighs on me every day. Can I do that again? Can I be one of the best-selling books? I mean, my book was ranked, our book, I co-authored with Matt Frazier. It was the top 15 selling books in the entire world, you know, for a day or two. En route to becoming a New York Times bestseller. That's on planet Earth. Out of 33 million books, we're in the top 15 best-selling, selling thousands per day, every day for a period, en route to landing number 4 on the New York Times list. And I carry that with me. You know, I grew up with Steve Prefontaine. He's on my wall right there, a poster that says, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. But he also said, and it's a little bit arrogant, I think, but I loved him. He died before I was born, but he was my number one role model, especially as a young person. Even you know, today he's way up there. He said, "Man, is there anything worse than being second best?" And he was America's greatest running legend in the 70s. He was unbelievable before he died in a automobile accident at age 24, I think, 23 or 24. Never saw his full potential, but yeah, that's part of it, John. Is that you said the word striving. I caught that. Or at least one of you said it. I've been a striver. I've been a high performer. I had to have the best grades in school. I had to have the fastest time. I had to be the fastest runner in school. I had to be the best at whatever I did. Of course, I had to be on magazine covers and front page newspapers. And it wasn't ego driven either, which is the weird thing. It's something wired inside that I don't even want to be in the spotlight. I mean, trust me, I don't. I have a very hard time committing to anything. I've had a dozen podcast invites. This is the only one I've agreed to. And some are big.
Oh,
Some are
Thank you,
big
Robert.
ones with celebrity type people. And I haven't been able to commit to it because it's not because of the anxiety and I don't want the spotlight. It's just, I've been wired to be a high performer. That what is it like to be average? And again, I understand I come from a privileged background. You know, I'm a white male born in the United States of America, grown, raised in one of the safest and best cities in America, college town, Corvallis, Oregon, college educated parents, PhD professor dad. I have a lot of privilege. I understand that. I write about that, including my new book. And I talk about that privilege and how I use it and how much great gratitude I have for it. But it doesn't change my wiring that I've been designed to be this high achiever. And so when I don't, I feel incredible levels of failure. I mean, you don't even know the language I used yesterday. My wife is out of town, so I was texting her. She's in Santa Fe visiting her parents. I had expressions like, I'm disappointed in myself. I'm, a loser. I'm whatever. Like this is not normal what you'd think Robert Cheeke would say to himself, but it's that ugly side of being what my doctor back in Arizona when I lived there was saying comes with being a high performer or high achiever. He said musicians get it, entertainers get it, athletes get it. It's not just the butterflies and nervousness before getting on stage or before a podcast interview or whatever. It's this constant voice or that little guy or gal on your shoulder that says, you got to be the best. You've got to be the best. Of course, and no wonder I was a no-name guy. I ended up, working with bodybuilding.com and friends with Jay Cutler and multiple photos with Arnold and all that. Of course that's going to happen because that's part of my DNA. Of course I'm going to get endorsements from Rich Roll and Tabitha Brown and all that. It just comes with the territory. And people might think, oh, that's great. Look at all his photos of celebrities on internet, online, all that kind of stuff. But inside here, man, it's a tough world to be in. And I say it with gratitude and with grace and appreciation for even the ability. I mean, I was just in Thailand a few weeks ago and, saw a lot of poverty, and I've been to Panama and Colombia and parts of Mexico and parts of the United States. Seen a lot of poverty in a lot of places I've been to, and I've seen a lot of struggle and heartache. I get it. I know I'm a privileged person, but it doesn't change the mental challenges that come with the achiever and striver status that's inherent within me. And I don't expect any sympathy or empathy from anybody else. I get to do some amazing things. I get to see the world. I get to have these interesting social groups. I get to, I go backstage during rock concerts for certain bands, major bands. You might even know who I'm talking about. Anytime I want. Been on the tour bus. I've been on like the Def Leppard tour bus. But it comes with a price of even within social media trying to maintain an image which is silly, but I still get sucked into, and that's where, John, you have a very either keen observation or experience, because you said very, very similar to what my doctor said about where this comes from within, it comes from me, and it comes from being a striver. And unless I want to be average or below average or just give up on everything, which I've thought about, to be honest, not give up. I mean, giving up on trying to, just giving up on writing books, giving up on trying to be significant. I've thought about that. I've thought about hiding out. I've thought about moving to another continent and hiding out and getting off the internet. um, just living a quiet life, doing my own thing, away from everything. I've thought about it. But to your point, that's also, it reminds me that it probably doesn't have to do with a diet or lifestyle. I've been dealing with this stuff. I mean, including this high achiever stuff since before I was vegan, as a kid who wanted to be the best at everything in school.
I think even if you moved to like a little island, you'd build the best hut on that island. Like you'd find a way. I think you said something that really resonated for me. You wonder what it's like to be average, or sometimes you wish, and it's almost like for me as well. Like I may be a little bit addicted to caffeine. Drinking coffee doesn't necessarily boost me up super high. It keeps me normal. And if I miss that coffee, then I drop. And so same as you, Monday, I signed 3 clients. Tuesday, I get the confirmation that Robert's coming on our podcast. Wednesday, I hit some PRs in the gym. Thursday, it's a rest day. I stay at home. Nothing blew up on Instagram, whatever. And I'm not saying like this week, but just in general. And I have like an average day. My bills are paid. My food is here. Life is good. But average feels like a step down from all these high achievements that I'm addicted to getting. And sometimes I'll step back and I'll look at a week and I'll be like, I had 6 really big wins, but it's Sunday and I haven't done anything exceptional today. And I don't feel like I'm enough. And so I'm sure there are other people listening that can resonate with this. I think you opening up and sharing that's strength, brother. Vulnerability is way more of a strength than a weakness. And again, for mental health for men, I mean, I'm going to put this out there. Maybe this has nothing to do with this podcast, but how many mass shootings have been committed by women? Like, it's not that we just have a gun problem in the United States. I think we have a mental health problem, and I think it's a large part on men for not being able to express themselves or get help or feel comfortable doing that, because they've been told they'll be weak if they cry, they'll be weak if they reach out. So I just want to say you are, I just got Brooke's handwriting. It says be the change, like be the change you want to see in the world. I feel like you're doing a wonderful job of that, brother. Full
Yeah.
disclosure, back to the coffee. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick. I will let Brooke hop in with her wins of the week. I will listen and then I'll be back.
Well, I just wanted to say that, well, I think everybody on this podcast is a high achiever, including our producer, Sean. Sean is on fire. But yes, I think with being a high achiever, I know for me, I have struggled for so long with focusing on the journey, and I know everybody's like, "Love the journey," but it's hard when you're focused on a goal, and it's like you accomplish that goal, and then you're immediately setting another goal, and then another goal, and then it's like, you always wanna be. I know for me, and it sounds like you're the same way, you always wanna be the best version of yourself, because if you're not, you're going backwards, right? And you don't wanna go backwards, so it's kind of this struggle of always beating your best and being better, and there's always just some goal on the horizon, and it's really hard, at least for me, to love the journey and love the journey of getting to the stage, or making a big business move or going to some event or whatever it is, and then when it's over, I'm just like, oh, what's the next thing you know
Yeah, and I think you get, or I don't want to say you, I'm going to say, I'll speak first person. I think I get addicted to it as
Yeah.
well. For example, the day, and this happened multiple times. I've written 6 books now, or at least that have been published. I've written probably 15 books, but not all of them have made it to bookstores or publication. It's just the journey of being a writer since I was a kid. Even my most recent book, The Impactful Vegan, it comes out in June. The day that I finished it, I started writing a new book. I did that.
Wow.
I did that. I mean, within, you could even say weeks. It was really a few months, but weeks of becoming a New York Times bestseller. I started the next book. Like, just what's the next thing,
Yep.
And I get kind of addicted to that being busy. And I don't even like being busy. I know we have 1,440 minutes every day, and that used to be a big part of my talk. I've been on a speaking tour for 18 years. I used to do a lot of motivational speaking back in the day, and how do we maximize the 1,440 minutes every day, and become the best versions of us and all this kind of stuff. But I get kind of addicted to that, and not necessarily addicted to the result, like addicted to, I'm not saying, winning or having a successful book or whatever, but it's the fear of idle time. Like there was a time when I couldn't even go on vacation. I was like, what am I going to do? I need to be working the whole time. I do suffer from workaholism, and part of that is trying to climb that ladder and knowing that I have some shortcomings, I would say. Like I've been slow to adapt to technological advancements. Social media, I can barely handle Instagram and Facebook, and even on a very basic level, like John knows, I just like hit like reshare when he tags me. I don't know how to do anything fancy, despite actually having one of the early YouTube accounts in 2009. If you want to entertain yourself, I'll kind of cover my eyes and cringe here. It's still up. The Robert Cheeke Show. Anyone remember that? 2009. I had the long hair.
I remember the hair.
75 episodes. Go check that out. It's still on the internet. The Robert Cheeke Show back in the day. That was 2009. I was, filmed with way before phones had cameras and all that stuff, using those digital cameras, and videos could only be up to 10 minutes. YouTube didn't allow more than that. I don't know if any of you remember
That's so funny.
Time period of YouTube, you couldn't go more than 10 minutes. So you had to stop at like 9:59. But anyway, I have, and you didn't miss much while you were away for a few minutes, John. I just talking about being addicted to kind of workaholism. And I'll just say this one thing, because it really, I didn't know there were other people like me. I was just listening to a podcast the other day. And again, I'm new to that too. I just got headphones. I've spent my entire life never used headphones in the gym until my wife got me some a few months ago. I never had my own music to listen to. I still to this day have no songs on my phone except for the ones that came with the iPhone from U2, I think it is. And then an album from the rapper Gray. That's all I have on my phone. No music, just that. I don't know technology stuff. But so I was listening to this podcast. I think it was a Rich Roll podcast. And the guest, or it could have been Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedantam. Maybe that's what it was. But the guest said that they were so, oh yeah, that's right. It was on Hidden Brain. It was about finding focus, ironically, as I'm struggling to find mine. The guest would actually take a flight, like a cross-country flight. This is before internet on planes, to avoid being on the internet. Do you know that when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I was embarking on my real writing career, writing Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness, 2008, 2009, I would find cheap flights from Portland to Orlando and fly so I could have 6 hours of focused writing, because my ADD and OCD and other things that I really deal with wouldn't let me escape the internet. I had the very popular forum on veganbodybuilding.com, thousands of active members. I was very popular for a period of time, the world's most recognized vegan bodybuilder, all these things coming my way all the time. The only way for me to escape it was to get on a plane, back when Wi-Fi was either very expensive or it didn't exist on certain airlines, and I would fly across the country, and I would work for those 6 hours. And then I'd stay in a cheap motel somewhere, again, without Wi-Fi, or didn't pay for it at Motel 6 or whatever, and then work, and then I would fly back, because that was the only way I could find my focus. And to this day, I struggle. I was just 2 days ago working on a project. I had to leave my phone upstairs. I'm in the basement right now. I couldn't be near it. I had to just, because I struggle with workaholism and checking things all the time. I've got to do some stuff immediately after I do this, and then do something else and do something else. And deadlines are closing in, and it's like, I don't even, what's it all for at times. So anyway, that's just a continuation of the striver mentality that we all have to some degree. And I think many of us, the three of us, are because of the ability to advance through technology and grow our following, therefore grow our impact, quite frankly, we all get kind of addicted to, like John struggled on on a Sunday, nothing's going on. Or Brooke, you're trying to find what's next. Or Sean, Sean Russell, like I said, I love that guy, producing this and producing other things. He's been producing events for decades, including events that I've been part of and loved. What's next? What's next? And you know what? At times I've just been so exhausted and burned out. I just don't want something to be next. I want to just hang out with my nieces and nephews and, like go to my hometown and just like kick back, like relax,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're doing all the right things though. By getting professional help. It sounds like your wife is very supportive. It sounds like you have some really good people in your corner. So I think you're certainly on the right path.
It's a path, that's for sure. It is.
I think our struggles too are a sign of our successes. Like if you were, for whatever reason, best job you could get, like highest paying job you could get is like a Walmart stalker and you're making $14 an hour, I don't think you'd have all this anxiety. You'd have other anxieties, other problems. So
yeah,
because it's for me, I've been on my own personal journey of trying to, I feel like there's two things that I could or should do in my life. One, like you said, the nieces and nephews, try and enjoy that time with those that are closest to me, that really matters to me, that matters deeply. Something even like this matters deeply to me. On the other hand, what can I do that's going to make the most positive impact on the world before I die? And it's how do I manage? Because being over here with my family almost makes me feel like I'm taken away from the world, but trying to do stuff for the world makes me feel like I'm taken away from my family. So it's really but I guess like if I'm in one of those two worlds, I'm at least doing the right thing in the right spot. But it is hard because, like you said, my anxiety has grown over the years. My phone broke last year. I remember this. It broke at like 7 p.m. So there was nowhere I could go to get a new one or get it fixed. In the ensuing hour, anxiety through the roof. Oh my God. I can't even get into WhatsApp to reply to my clients, like end of the world. After about an hour, my anxiety levels dropped to the lowest they have been since that day. There was no phone. There was no way to get to it. I couldn't do anything about it. I just had to accept it and move on. And so it's a lot. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We're not starving. We don't have, the same problems that someone that lives in another country might have, but what we're going through is real. And we are running into a little bit of a time crunch here. So I do want to talk about the Impactful Vegan. If you want to give an overview, you're welcome. But I really do want to ask. I was researching it. Brooke and I have bought it. We're waiting for it to come out in June. And one of the bullet points on Amazon even that hit me the most was approaches to promoting animal rights and veganism that are not helpful. So can you give us a sneak peek at any of that, like a little tidbit, just because I'm curious and somebody listening might want to know what's not helpful for the veganism movement?
Yeah, that is the most sensitive subject in the book, and it's not going to please everybody. But as the author, I'm trying to follow the evidence and the data and the surveys. And what I will say about it, without giving too much away, is that there are certain forms of activism that make us feel super empowered. Like, look at me standing up for animals. Look at all this great work that I'm doing. But the net impact on the target audience that we're trying to resonate with is a negative one, where it makes, again, these are surveys with non-vegans about what approaches appeal to them and turn them off and actually make them, in some cases, in their words, eat more animals because they feel anger and resentment towards vegans because of certain types of activism, which, again, I want to leave it a little bit vague because it is a part of the book. Those who are familiar with some of the Faunalytics data might, have some insight into that already or some awareness of that. But what I'm really trying to distill is that, myself included, we need to pull our egos back and understand we don't know what we don't know. We think we know what is best because that's where we get social confirmation from our peer group. That's not who we're trying to impact. We're trying to reach and resonate with a positive message those who are not currently vegan, those who are currently contributing to the exploitation and consumption and to the lives lost of animals, largely in the food system. And so what I'm looking at in on that bullet point in the listing is a section in one of the kind of later chapters of the book where it really starts to summarize what is really the most impactful and what are the things that we think are effective because our hearts are in the right place. We get support from our peer group, our social circle. In fact, we might even raise our social status because of look at the things that we do that are badges of honor for us, but that actually turn people away from veganism in a way that actually harms animals. Without going too much into further detail, there are friends and colleagues of mine I've had for years who are passionate animal rights activists, advocates, vegans, who, in my perspective, my opinion, have actually harmed animals as a result of them being vegan. Now, I don't know the exact number offset. My guess is after abstaining from consuming animals for X number of years, sparing 100 to 300 animals per year by not eating them, just solely living a vegan lifestyle, compared to the people they turn off, it's probably still a net positive. But it depends who you turn away. If that person is an influential person on social media, a podcaster, a content creator, whatever, that can create a cascade of events that actually has a negative net impact on animal suffering. And so what I will say is I think it'll be an interesting read. And just to give even a little bit more context, in some of these studies, and I largely looked at a particular faunolytic study because it's one of the few that are out there and it had thousands of participants and they're all non-vegans. They looked at things like different types of demonstrations. They looked at things like billboards, celebrities, challenges like Veganuary, books, documentaries, and what really is the most effective: social media, news stories, all this stuff. And what I will say is I think people will be surprised by some of the survey findings. And these are, some will be predictable, I think. Others, I think people will find quite surprising. And these have to do with some of the aspects in the book about simple and complex contagions and how ideas spread and how and what are called strong ties and weak ties and those implications within some of these things where, for example, I can give one thing away. Celebrities are not as influential as we think they are. They're very, very rarely early adopters. They wait for a grassroots movement to take hold. They assess their audience and how they respond. Anything from Black Lives Matter to Ukraine war to any current topic before they take a side or take a stance on anything, or even within veganism before they start helping push the snowball up the hill. They wait, observe, whatever, on the backs of those who have done the grassroots activism and laid the foundation for a movement, and then they come and help push it over to a tipping point, often getting the credit. So you get a lot of celebrities get the credit for making veganism grow, which they did to some degree, but only at the tip of the iceberg after the iceberg had been built and nurtured for decades and decades and decades from grassroots organizers who've done the fundamental work. And then that's where we have to work with celebrities and influencers to help push it over the edge. But they don't do it alone. And that's
I
amazing.
can certainly see that because I feel like people tend to disassociate with celebrities because they're celebrities and they're, have access to private chefs or whatever. They have a ton of money. So I could see where a celebrity might not be as relatable, but I am so excited because I have certain questions about certain forms of activism myself. And I can't wait to actually read empirical data to see what's really effective. I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you. That's the fun part is that these aren't like my opinions or views. I interviewed 30 of the world's leading experts in this topic, and then I looked at studies and surveys and data and what non-vegans are saying. It's easy to just talk to our own group But that's because, what worked on you, what to help bring you to veganism may not work for somebody else, or what worked for me may not work for you. And so what's statistically most probable and most likely to work on the largest number of people. And that's, I think, the data that needs to be shared. And it also means appreciating and understanding that they may not be our favorite forms of advocacy or activism. Like one thing I can share is that the plant-based movement is incredibly impactful. It doesn't matter if they still wear leather boots or even buy leather wallets, leather, or fur jackets or whatever. 99.99% of animal suffering is in the food industry. It's the food, it's the food, it's the food. Yes, vivisection is bad. Yes, rodeos and zoos and all these things are issues. Yes. 99.99% is food. We have to focus on that. So the plant-based movement, because they're creating habits, they're building these habits that people maintain for years and years and years, and then see benefits, weight loss and improved blood markers and, all health markers and all this kind of stuff. Then they tell their friends and ideas spread. Like, that is an underlooked and underappreciated aspect, because we always think like, well, veganism obviously is a ethical stance. Yes, it is. And it has these moral tenets and all this stuff, and it's for the animals. Yes. Totally agree. But we have to look at some of the drivers of the reasons why people keep animals off their plates. And that's why we have to recognize for-profit companies in addition to nonprofits. It's why we have to celebrate those, even who are not vegan, like Yves Potvin, who created Yves Veggie Cuisine in 1985, who changed the plant-based meat market forever. Yep. Not a vegan guy, but he left an indelible mark on the industry and spared millions, maybe billions of animal lives because of his innovative work. We have to look at it from that, not just our favorite people, our favorite influencers, our favorite forms of activism that make us feel good and empowered and look at me. No, it's what's really working to move the needle to reduce animal suffering on a global scale. There's so much more to cover, including why it's important to support organizations outside of the United States, where the US dollar stretches 10-fold, 20-fold, 100-fold in parts of poor Asian countries and African countries. 100 times difference. You want to spare 30 animals or 300? You want to spend 1,000 or 100,000? You want to spare 100,000? Okay, well then let's start working with some organizations outside the US where the US dollar can do amazing things. It's that kind of stuff. The book is fantastic.
That's where this book, I think, has that impact in the name. Impact. Like, what do you want to do with your time and with your dollar? You don't have to be vegan to make an impact, even being plant-based. Like you said, if we could eliminate all factory farming, they probably wouldn't make leather belts because there wouldn't be cows to use the leather from. So how can we, whether you're plant-based or not, what can you do with your life to make the biggest impact possible? I think that's what drives the three of us and can drive anybody listening to this. You don't have to be a huge influencer. You can make an impact every day you go to the store and purchase something that is not meat. A meat alternative, even if it's not the best food in the world, even if it's a little bit junk food, or whatever you can do to get consumers to go in that route so that the producers will bring the more ethical options to the table, literally and figuratively. So with that, we got to close out. We got to run here. Robert, if somebody wants to reach out to you or if they want to get your book, what's the best way to do that right now?
Right now, honestly, I think is pre-ordering from your local bookstore or Amazon. We do have a website. I think it's theimpactfulvegan.com, but it won't be live for another week or so. I'm not sure when this podcast airs, but so eventually you can just search for The Impactful Vegan and the website will pop up, which will have like all the pre-order bonuses and all that kind of stuff. But for now, and even if you order like today, before that website even goes, you'll still qualify for those pre-order bonuses. All you have to do is just let us know that you pre-ordered and we'll send those. They're mostly digital and coupon codes and things like that. They're still valuable, worth hundreds of dollars, but they're easy. We can always just send it in an email. It's easy to get it to you even, weeks down the road. So thank you, John and Brooke and Sean for producing this. And I'd love to do it again sometime.
We're going to have to do another episode. I still got a list of questions for you.
Oh yeah.
Any closing words, Brooke?
I think you wrapped it up really well. I think we said we were going to end this with be the change every time. And I think you absolutely hit it on the head and hit the nail on the head with saying, you can be the change with just simple things you do at the grocery store. So that's it. And thank you so much, Robert, for coming on. We admire you so much. Me and John, we just have talked highly about you this whole time, and we are so grateful that you came on today. And thank you.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed meeting both of you in person, and I appreciate your kindness, your warmth, and allowing me to open up and share a little bit today in ways that I normally don't. And I think that speaks to the fact that I feel comfortable with both of you. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Robert. So, our first guest episode on Vegans Who Lift, the Godfather of Vegan Bodybuilding, Robert Cheeke. Thank you, brother. Thank you for being the change that we all want to see in the world. Keep it up, brother. Take care.